After some hesitation, I was able to have the courage to ask, "How about we?" As in the movie, "Give it a try." I blurted out a few sentences before I could stop myself, and I immediately regretted them. Regarding them, I was uncertain. Answer, but my curiosity prevailed. "Greetings to everybody, this is Abigail. Today, I would want to discuss a time in my life. Things I'll never forget every time a heavy sensation comes when you think about it. In my heart, and I'm driven to place blame. It's a story I wish I could forget. But in life, we don't always receive that. It all began years ago when I was 16. My family and I reside in a city in the United States. As beautiful as it is mysterious I thought I had it all at one time. The family was wealthy, and my parents were thriving in there. My dad did a fantastic job. My mom was an entrepreneur and finished interior designers. Have busy schedules, yet they always found time for me and my two kids. 2-year-old Ryan and his twin brother Ethan are unrelated boys whose parents remarried at the time of our birth. More than I am, and I would characterize them as such. They made certain I have everything I could possibly need, whether they were material objects or, to be absolutely honest though, the affection that I was shown how wonderful it was by my parents. Never encountered a love quite like the one I acquired from Ryan, and I had a unique connection with Ethan. Distinctive. Before delving further into this, don't forget to follow my channel to learn more incredible facts. Tales. Pay close attention to the very finish. Please show your support by hitting the you won't want to hit the like button, I assure you. Forget this story, they weren't just my brothers stood up for me no matter what. Defending me in the same way that they showed me affection seemed more profound than my parents' love because they continuously shown it. My parents expressed their affection for me by permitting me to live in comfort, but Ryan and Ethan exceeded expectations. They were aware of my depression, despite the fact that I stayed quiet. When I was younger, I could always have a conversation with them without fear of criticism, regardless of whether I was accosted or fell bullying when my friends teased me for Ryan, the school attire I wore. The first to step in was Ethan, and defended me when I came home crying. Rather of just consoling me, they went to the school to deal with the kids who would not use force, yet their sharp comments and cold demeanor ensured that those kids didn't bother me ever again. We were always ready to help, like heroes. Whenever I needed it, I thought of the evenings when our entire family would put together, but I always liked to sit. Ryan and Ethan would finish up, putting their arms around me, sometimes even jokingly arguing over who ought to sit next to me. They were continually making jokes about me, pledging to be their adorable little princess. Did they have a lifelong duty to protect me? Over time, I realized that their fondness for I was different. Additionally, they were the first to help others. As a teenager, I conquered my issues with body image. In the evenings, I would learn from Ethan how to wear soothing cosmetics with little to no makeup. I convinced myself that I looked beautiful the way Ryan was the one who always called me the most beautiful little sister in the world. Helped. I dressed in ways that gave me a sense of importance, and their love was different from mine. Brazos. My parents were at work with Ryan and me. Ethan was my motivation and emotional support system. They helped me go to school, and they helped me with my assignment and pledged that I would never felt isolated in the dead of night if I was unable to. While they were sleeping, I would knock on their door and they would always welcome me with a smile. Sometimes they would instruct me to smile, sit beside me, or tell me amusing stories. Before I fell asleep, those little things that made me believe they were in love was far larger than anything I never acquired from my parents, but the love that I thought was pure and innocent would eventually lead to an I'll share the take a nap when I'm feeling well enough to confront the aspect of my recollections that I recall it just because the youngest relative I frequently took part in stupid. Without regard for criticism, I would occasionally jump in and embrace them, or casually rest on their laps with the intention of we're sitting at a location. Ryan and Ethan wasn't only my brother, they were the people I never considered to be my closest friends. Felt embarrassed, even when showcasing. On a bright summer afternoon, love. That day, as I emerged from my bedroom, the sunlight streamed through the large window that provides a peaceful atmosphere in the living area. The environment where Ethan and Ryan were perched on the couch, I focused on the I didn't know what they were watching on television. Despite the fact that they seemed to be absorbed in it, I instinctively stepped closer, stroking. I was invisible to my sight. Coming, so I inquired in a light-hearted way, "What are you doing now?" I chuckled. "Nothing," and established themselves on there. I rest my head on Ryan's lap's shoulder. "What are you two watching?" I carefully inquired, but I didn't receive a quick response as I glanced at the screen. I discovered the film was romantic, and as the film was getting close to the emotional peak of the two main characters on the TV, they were cuddling and kissing, sensuously watching while I stare at on the screen, Ryan and Ethan transformed into. I smiled shyly, a little nervous. "Don't look," he covered my eyes with his palm. I laughed. "But this isn't a kiddie movie, Abigail." Attempting to avoid him, "I'm not no longer a child, I'm 16. I ridiculed it, yet privately I learned the scene quite fascinating, so I continued trying to peep through anonymous fingertips, laughing and insulting both of them at once. At that moment, consciously or unconsciously, Ethan felt something being pressed into his. The sensation of something warm and hard in my pocket startled me, and my heart was pounding, so I pulled quickly. I dared not look back at my hand. "I'm sorry, Ryan or Ethan," for stuttering. I abruptly sprang to my feet and collided with I closed the room's door behind myself. My heart pounding, I thought as I sat on my bed. What transpired? The image of the remote control was in Ethan's pocket. I'm mentally reliving my face. Blush. Was I overanalyzing it, or was it an incident that I didn't know about? But the humiliation, and I couldn't because I felt ashamed. Successfully leave my room. The thought about what Ryan and Ethan could restricting me to my room, preventing me from remove the image that has been causing me trouble. Not just the touch, but also the uncomfortable realization I had transgressed a threshold I didn't know existed. The closeness we shared seems to show a small distinction between had not given. Before that evening, I had hidden myself in my space for a while, so I decided to go down to. The closeness between us seemed to had a sensitive threshold, something I had never taken into consideration before retreating in my room for a while. In contrast, I chose to sink to the living. In my room, I was becoming hungry, and I knew my family was probably waiting for me to join them for dinner, but the situation involving the afternoon was still visible to me, and I had some. I was embarrassed and kept wondering whether Ryan, as Ethan reflected on what had happened, but I later comforted myself. that it may not have been as severe as I thought. Considered, and they may have already. Without giving it any thought, I opened the door. Silently tiptoed along the hallway, wanting to keep my eyes off of them as I approached the living room. I stopped to listen for any sounds I made as I slipped into the looking around the living area, worried that I may capture their interest, but I was quite aback to discover that there was one which I thought was strange, and paused in front of the couch. Where were I have sat with them before. I was still trying to figure out in the afternoon, identifying the channel on the TV while two faces glanced in the same direction as they leaned down. "What are you doing, Abigail? Taking the same path as me?" One could hear Ethan's voice just next to. I jumped in my ear when Ryan laughed, adding you loudly from the other side. Seem like a thief, therefore I offered a little turn around and let out a startled scream upon seeing I have them right behind me. My sudden presence nearly made me halt. Heart, and we all jumped out at the same time. Ethan and Ryan glanced at me and left me, laughing uncontrollably. I couldn't contain my laughter and, "Gott, you really frigtinet me," I responded, understanding I made an effort to feel furious, but I couldn't. I had to laugh because I felt like I'd just been unexpectedly. "How are you?" teased. "You appear to be awake." Ryan Shady looked up at something, brow smiling mischievously, and Ethan patted my head, saying that you're not going to eat. "You're doing what?" I laughed too. The uncomfortable tension that existed between them at that time. Now that the afternoon has arrived, at ease. I reflected that what I possessed, it couldn't be what was touched earlier. I had assumed that both of them, they wouldn't be laughing as much as. With such thoughts, I felt as though relief and tried to act as though nothing had taken place. I was only confirming. If anyone was around, I smiled widely, attempting to change the topic of discussion to what? "Are you two behind me, Ethan? You're trying to scare me?" I shrugged. "I was only trying to," Ryan stated, "surprise you somewhat, but I wasn't prepared for." He was shocked by your remark. The speech had a light-hearted tone. Who would have thought you would jump up like that? Your expression was really important. The atmosphere became lighter and more happy as we all burst out laughing. At this point, Ryan placed his hand on. "All right, let's go eat," he murmured, gesturing to my shoulder. "The whole family is looking forward to seeing you." Smiled, nodded, and pursued them. Family had already gathered around the dining table as quickly as I entered in the kitchen. My parents smiled faintly as I sat down when they saw me come in, feeling the warmth of the kitchen and the calm, cozy. When eating supper, our conversation was filled with a lot of laughs. Ryan's parents spoke about business while, and Ethan would occasionally ridicule me with. I participated in the sentiment, and the lighter humor of embarrassment from earlier seemed to disappeared after I finished my lunch. Thought, despite the fact that I was still embarrassed by the afternoon and I had stopped taunting. I smiled as I comforted myself since I was uncomfortable. I assured myself that all would be okay. Ryan and Ethan are still the best. Since I have never had brothers before, I fell asleep serenely, but the next morning was not quite at ease, with only a thin wall separating Ryan's and Ethan's, areas where even the smallest sounds are allowed, like movies or music, to be available on Audible. I was notorious for staying up late, but on that particular day, I woke up at about 8 in the morning. I thought I was continue to dream, or that the sun through the drapes, it was making me blind, yet After a few minutes after awakening, I became conscious of a strange sound from my adjacent room, which was sandwiched between Ryan's and Ethan's. The rooms in our house had thin walls, thus even the slightest noise might spread. I was used to listening to them play effortlessly, play games or converse, but this time the noise was odd, so at first I assumed they were watching an action-packed movie, but there, as I listened more, I became increasingly confident that, became aware that there was an issue with it wasn't the kind of sound you hear in movies, and it had a peculiar cadence. As my heart raced, I had a startling thought. I didn't mind getting red in the face, want to accept it, but the sound became obvious. And it wasn't just music, regular dialogue, either. Even when the obstacles stopped, the fast, sensual sound was still audible to me. Noises mixed with loud. Despite my best efforts to suppress my breathing, the more I listened, the more assured as it happened, Ethan and Ryan were taking note. I felt guilty about something. I had to wake up, but why? Listen, my heart rate increased, and I put my hands where I thought I was on fire, over my face in an attempt to stop the concepts that were infiltrating my. Recall that I stated that this is a private matter. Everybody, I think, has seen things like me, but hearing, given that it originated in their chamber, despite the discomfort, we had always remained close. And I never imagined myself in this predicament situation, but the noise seemed to continue. I sat up more and more and walked away. I whispered to my bed before gently opening my door. Wasn't sure what I should do, but I couldn't stay still, so I started to walk slowly along the hallway, trying to stay away from make any noise. But as I approached, the commotion at the door of Ryan and Ethan got so clear that it appeared as if I stood unsure, and the walls had vanished. I didn't know what to do, and my heart was pounding. Felt uncertain, confused, and humiliated. I've known all along that these happened, but when Ryan informed me about it in Ethan's room was completely different. Meeting, I chewed my lip, unsure if should I remain here or return to my room. I was curious about my strengths. I attempted to lean against the door. The sounds only grew louder to calm me. The loudness pulled me in, and the door slid open, and I stepped back. To my surprise, Ethan filled in too. His astonished eyes widened before me as had he been entangled in anything he shouldn't have been. We stood with our backs to one another for what seemed like an eternity, silent. Ethan cleared his throat in a way that was unacceptable. I'm trying to ease the tension, he said. What are you doing here, Abigail? His voice faltered and he avoided looking at him. He was as flushed as I could see. Despite my embarrassment, I couldn't look at him, since I felt my heart racing, and I tried to speak as I was just passing. His stuttering didn't sound credible, but there was nothing else that sprang to mind. At that time, the sounds within when the room fell silent, Ryan walked out. Ethan's face was redder than an ounce, and they exchanged glances, searching for the right justification, yet the tense silence remained silent. Seemed excessive, so I created an awkward grin to hide my sadly, I was only passing past. Didn't repeat anything. With joy, I turned and left to get out of the situation when I quickly returned to my room and closed the door, pressing against it and taking a big breath. My heart kept pounding, and I had a strange, uneasy sensation. I continued to reenact the uncomfortable moment. I can see Noah in my mind. Ryan's expression upon opening the door. I couldn't stop thinking about him. The setting between the three of us was tight, and I couldn't eliminate the feeling that I was always pondering what they were thinking. Me at that. Maybe they were just as uncomfortable as I was. Or maybe more crucially, what overhearing worried me the most. Something inappropriate. It may have been an unfortunate incident, even though I was terrified of it, would change how I view Ryan and my two closest pals, Ethan, my brothers. Despite my face being covered, I wore protection. The negative thoughts became louder as I tried to ignore them. I told myself this was just an unanticipated event. No, maybe I was reading too much into it. But I couldn't help but stand up. I'm pacing my room in an attempt to shake off the nervousness. It was just an accident, I muttered to myself, as if trying to convince myself that it wasn't a major worry, but I sensed that something was missing from my heart. There needed to be a change, thus this feel normal again, just before to hearing a knock on my door, and my heart sank as I realized it couldn't. Usually, my parents didn't knock. Time they needed my help, so Jose or Ethan. I had to take a big breath too. Before I opened the door, please calm down. And when I did, I saw Ethan standing. He still has that anxious look in his eyes. Refrained from overtly trying to recover his. He rubbed his head, keeping his composure. His grin was uncomfortable and bashful. I'm sorry, Abigail, for what happened. Ryan, it wasn't what you thought. We were just watching a movie and perhaps the moment wasn't. Yes, I did stand still for a while staring. He was staring at him with hesitation. I could see uncertainty in his eyes. The confusion in his. Ryan took a position behind him while he spoke. His face displayed the same shyness and humiliation similar to that of Ethan's. We're trying to find the right words, but because of the extreme stress, we couldn't speak. We believed we were anticipating someone to converse with. I saw that if this unpleasant circumstance, if that continued, it would be quite unpleasant. I took such a huge breath and decided to. I smiled in shame at first, but I tried to come across as casual. Come on, for example, to lighten the mood. Had no intention of creating. Please don't seem overly uptight. I was just feeling strange. As they went by, Ethan and Ryan spoke to each other. A quick glance that subtly conveys their eyes after some time. Ethan let out a breath and smiled slightly. You're sure, Abigail? Are you comfortable? Inquired, his tone brimming with doubt. I immediately reassured them, trying to alleviate their concerns. I'm all right. In fact, I think I adore. I immediately added more for you too, in an effort to make them both chuckle. Stared at me in astonishment for a second. For a minute there was a silent agreement between us, so I thought of a way to. In order to minimize the embarrassment, I took Ethan's hand, gestured. Ryan is free to come talk to me in my room. Okay, let's consider this as a way to make. In order to compensate for the inconvenience, I suggested that they were surprised by the suggestion, but nodded. Following a brief pause, it seemed that the only way to reduce the stress, so I smiled and walked to my room, with each of them progressively following. As the three of us sat down on, I decided to make my bed more cheerful by joking while I watched Ryan. I implied that the movie was so good that they both lost sight of. Ryan covered his mouth uneasily when he laughed. The look on his face as he urged, "Come on, Abigail, stop jesting. We just didn't expect. I told you clearly that I thought you had cranked it up to allow me to." As I hear that, I raise my eyebrows in a fun manner. It made us both giggle at the tension, seemed to momentarily vanish after engaging in a lengthy conversation with my. I looked at Ryan because I was so fascinated. Ethan doesn't know if I should bring up the thought that had just crossed my mind. After some hesitation, I was able to have the courage to ask, how about we? As in the movie, give it a try. I blurted out a few sentences before I could stop myself, and I immediately regretted them. Regarding them, I was uncertain. Answer, but my curiosity prevailed. Consequently, Ethan and Ryan turned their large eyes directed toward me, startled by my "Are you serious?" words. Ryan inquired. He sounded incoherent, as if he couldn't believe I was requesting something so audacious that I tried to nod, maintain a serious appearance. I was merely, "I'm curious, so I guess I should give it a shot." Spoke despite my voice weakening and my unable to look them in the eyes. Ethan responded immediately and firmly. Tone, and both of them surveyed the area. Away, but I persisted in a gentle manner, gritting their teeth in an attempt to reassure them and encourage them to give. They made an effort, but they were silent for a while. Then, a second later, I could see Ryan let out a sigh. Their gazes were divided and said with a look of helplessness, "Okay, but this time only, and we have to make sure no one knows about it by keeping it a secret." We all sat there as the room became quiet, gently breathing, and I felt with our hearts pounding, we began cautiously with every move and action. Felt wary yet also full of a strange energy. I have no idea how much time has passed, but it appeared that the environment had vanished, leaving the three of us by alone. When it was all over, the sun had risen high, filling the space with light. We kept quiet and just laid there as beside each other, we lay breathing. With the uneasiness I was worried about completely vanished, I felt a deeper connection between us, as if we had just had a horrible experience together. We went into the kitchen to prepare lunch, and everything seemed odd, as though nothing noteworthy had taken place, but I knew in my heart that the boundary between us had shifted, and instead of regret, I felt a new bond feeling that brought us closer together than before. Ryan smiled softly at me. He said, "Are you all right?" And I gave a nod. Smile back at him. "I'm okay, and I think, according to the individual, I love you both even more." The words made me flush, but they held my hands kindly, their eyes full of, "We also love you," they said with passion. We continued eating ever since our first date, enhanced our closeness in a subtle yet obvious way, was deeper now, and the unease had vanished, and whatever imperceptible distance exists between us vanished every time our eyes met. Could get a new understanding of closeness that had never been there earlier, but I knew deep within what we did was wrong. We had inadvertently crossed breaking down the barriers that society and morality had established. For me, it resulted from the rash curiosity of youth. I don't try to defend it, but our emotions and the investigation that led us to this conclusion. I don't regret anything, although there are moments when I still feel fuzzy sensation of unease that we don't talk about, as if it were an unspoken agreement to abandon it like Ryan did. And Ethan are looking at me right now. They no longer regard me the same way, being kinder and more cautious with me, as if they fear harming me. As whenever I gaze into their eyes, the heart races between excitement and, nevertheless, our curiosity led us along a new path. We never imagined that our bond would has approached, I know that it has. Altered irrevocably. Looking back, I can see how my rash actions had an impact on our relationship, a lasting impression on me. Went beyond what was specifically instructed by our sentiments and curiosity, but no one, as everyone else knows, I am unable to escape reality. Every thought I have inside of me brings the same acknowledgement of my credulity. That idea continues to be a recurrent, a reminder of what I came to. Acknowledge that inquiry comes naturally, especially when you were younger, but not all. Some individuals ought to follow their curiosity. Limits are there to protect us from making mistakes that can result in long-term scars instead of confining us. Boundaries protect life's most precious assets, items that sometimes hold back, and staying grounded is the best line of action. Anecdote serves as a reminder to pause and consider your options before taking impulsive action. Urges, whilst strong emotions may fade over time, these effects could not go away. Lasting admiration, understanding, and a shared feeling of responsibility constitutes the foundation of true and enduring love. Relationships, treasure the ties you own, and avoid endangering them for fleeting desires for the things that truly things are valuable enough to keep.